deal. So I'm Anna Haley. I'm a professor at the School of Social Work. Some of you, I recognize some current students who snuck in here to the alumni session. No, you're absolutely very welcome. And then some alums who I may or may not have had. I teach this content in the elective HR management course that is part of our management and policy curriculum currently. But I also kind of take it on the road, so to speak, because I believe so strongly, as Erin just alluded to, and Olivia also got into, that we are inadequately trained in our field to self-advocate using tools that actually are also really appropriate for advocating on behalf of other constituencies or entities, like our organizations. Like the negotiation model that I'm going to cover does that for yourself in compensation, but in a lot of other kinds of contexts. And we also know that in terms of compensation, and by compensation I mean salary, pay, but also I mean benefits like health insurance, retirement contributions, paid time off, etc., the whole package. That negotiation, lack of negotiation, or not negotiating effectively is one of the biggest remaining explainers of gender and other types of pay gap. So in our field and beyond. So we really need to get a handle on this. So a few introductory things. Jakia is going to help me monitor the chat because I'm in a situation where I only have one screen, and when I share screen, all I can see is me and just a handful of other thumbprint faces. I can't see the chat. So I am happy to take your questions and comments as we go. If I think that I'm going to address the issue in a little bit, I might table it, but I'm happy to have those come in as we go versus waiting for a Q&A at the end, especially if you're confused. That's the first bit. What's the other bits? I think Jakia is going to help me monitor the chat because, again, I can't see the comments, but please do make them. And if I don't respond immediately, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's just because of my technology limitations. So how are we doing? Are we okay? Are we all set? Ready to go? Erin, Jakia, anything else I didn't cover?
No, this is great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So we're going to cover in an hour and a half that we have, or until 1:30, we are going to cover the elements of negotiation. So the components of a model of negotiation that, for example, in MBA programs across the country, MBA students take an entire course in. Like one full course is completely dedicated to this negotiation model. So we're going to do it in an hour and a half, and we're going to make it work for us, right? But this is why I need you to answer questions and make comments. Then I'll talk about what you need to do to prepare, and then we will simulate the process, and not role play, but we'll talk through what kind of tips for how you actually engage the process. Okay, but before I get there, I need to do a little motivational thing because I've taught this for 20 years and I know full well that, it's not my favorite thing to do. I like to talk about negotiation. I've trained my 17 and 20-year-old kids in negotiating, sometimes to my detriment when they try to negotiate with me, but it's all about self-power. It's good. But I know in our field, I know in terms of gender issues, I know in terms of other positionalities or identities, marginalized folks societally, that negotiation is really fraught. But it is time, right? It is time for social work and it is time to negotiate. And for this next job, for your current job, right? You need to think about how to set your value, like what you're worth, and how to ask for it, right? When you learn what you're worth, you will stop giving people discounts on you. That's kind of a profound existential point, but I really mean it. But in order to do that kind of internal values work, you also need the tools to actually enact it. And that's what we're doing today. And to communicate, to lean in. And I'll tell you about leaning in. If it's hard to imagine advocating for yourself in this way through negotiation, let's try to motivate it in an additional way. It's critical to engage in negotiation because it helps not just you, but your current colleagues and your future colleagues. One of my main focuses in my research and teaching and other kinds of consulting and work is that we must deal with chronic underpayment, undercompensation in our field. Because what it means is that we can't sustain ourselves, we can't best serve the clients. And it also means that folks who absolutely can't undertake such low paid work will never enter the field with us. And that means, because we know that kind of assets, like financial means, is highly correlated with race and ethnicity and class, we are excluding from our field a whole bunch of people. And when we talk about diversity in our organizations, there's a hypocrisy in that. So there's a social justice issue. Not only is it just enough that that you need to get paid a manageable, respectable amount, but if we're going to diversify our organizations meaningfully, we have to get on that. So a little step, part of a whole, is negotiating. All right, so that's my pitch. All right, the other couple pitches in terms of negotiation is that there's almost always a bargaining zone. We'll talk about bargaining zones in a second, but that means that it is fairly rare that when you are engaged in negotiation for compensation, that every single amount is completely fixed, immovable, not to be discussed. And the goal of this model is for you, and when I say you today, I'm going to assume employee or prospective employee, so the reverse applies to the employer. The goal here is to try to get you to achieve a reasonable portion of the bargaining zone, rather than always winding up at the bottom end of it, that you can try to wind up in the middle, or if you're highly qualified, that you can wind up at the top end of what the bargaining zone is. And for every item, not just pay, but health insurance costs, retirement savings contributions, paid time off, professional development funds, all of that, right? That you are able to get a fair amount, that you share in that with your employer. And we also know that when people don't negotiate, so there's the pay gap, there's this issue of diversity in organizations not being supported, but we also know amply that workers are undersatisfied, sometimes underperforming. Though in our field, we're so dedicated, it probably doesn't affect performance, but it definitely affects satisfaction, longevity, turnover, remaining in the field even. So this is important stuff. Okay, so that's my pep talk. So hopefully we're ready to go, right? I know you're all really excited to think about negotiating now. Okay, so let's talk about the elements. And Jakia, do we have any questions yet or comments? You're going to chime in, right?
Yes, I will.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So general comments, general elements. So parties. This is not like having a party. These are the people. If you're doing organizational to organizational negotiation, in other contexts it's organizations, but here compensation negotiation context, these are the individuals. So the prospective employee could be the potential supervisor, could be an HR person who's negotiating with the potential employee. The items are all the different resources to be allocated, right? That's salary, health insurance for the employee, for dependents, and the cost of that paid days off, skill development funds, what I just said, right? Okay, so that's what you're going to be talking about, right, in the negotiation. The position versus the interest. This is an important concept to get at, because this is what touches on the issue of strategy in negotiating. And it's something that people tend to get a little, oh, this is why I don't like this, about negotiating. The position is what you say, like each party, right? So what you as the prospective employee say you would like at a given moment. Your interest is the underlying or unstated need or reasoning for what you say. But you don't share this with the other party, right? So for example, setting salary, and you set salary not only because it's what you can survive on, but it's what you think you're worth. It's what you need to save for buying a house or for your car note or whatever, right? It's for savings, for that kind of thing. It's some personal calculation. You do not share that with the other party. That is your business. All that you share is what you're hoping for, that clean number. You do not get into why, right? And I know you're thinking, but what if they ask? We're going to talk about that, I promise. Okay, but position versus interest. The public part, what you say in the negotiation, is the position, But all the reasoning underneath that, that is your business, that is not theirs. That's an important distinction, to not get into your business with them. And we will get touch back on why that is in a little bit. Okay, more elements. So this is breaking out, again, the model, right? These are the different tools, the bits and pieces of it. So different points, target point, reservation point, also really, really important in negotiating, right? You don't negotiate, you're not negotiating if you don't have these points. So the target point is where you want to wind up at the end, what you hope for. Oh man, this is how much I want to get paid. This is how much paid time off would be ideal. This is what I really want to go for or walk away with in terms of employer contribution by retirement savings, all that. Like, I'd love to end here. The reservation point, that's your bottom line. So what does a bottom line mean? It's important to tease that out concretely. A bottom line means, and this is the case of the employee side, that if an amount on any item falls below that amount, that line, right? So an offer for salary coming in from an employer falls below your bottom line. By definition here, you're not going to accept it. You're going to walk away. Okay, that is incredibly important, because if you do not have a bottom line across the board for all of your items, you're not negotiating and you will accept anything. Right? Negotiation hinges upon, sorry, that was my mail just tossing through the mail slot. It hinges upon your ability to set limits, to set boundaries, and the other parties too. And just to note, for the employer side, their bottom line is actually the higher number, like as high as they're willing to go. And if it's higher, they say no. The target point for them is actually the lower number. So they're kind of aiming to conserve resources, to not, blow the whole bargaining zone. So they're like, so the target point is like more conservative, right? So it's the opposite for the two parties. But the reservation point is really critical. So it means that at the point where it hits the reservation point, like it's at your bottom line, you're actually kind of ambivalent. You could take it or leave it. And if it's below, you'll leave it. Right? And if you won't leave it for falling below, then you're not negotiating, or you've not set your points strongly enough that you can defend them. We'll talk about that. So the BATNA. The BATNA is an acronym. That means your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, your backup plan. What will you do if you don't take the deal? So we can imagine quickly that having a BATNA makes it much easier to negotiate. Having a good BATNA. Having a BATNA that's like living in your parents' moldy, kind of stinky basement where the cat litter is, and the TV is like a tube TV from the 80s. That, while you try to find a job, that kind of thing, that's not a great BATNA, right? Maybe for like a couple of weeks or so. But versus like an amazing BATNA is you've already gotten a job offer. And so subsequent offers and negotiating for subsequent offers, you already have one in the bag. So you can imagine easily, right? That feels so much more comfortable. So the reality is in between. You're not necessarily going to be in your parents' basement. We're all a little beyond that at this point. You may, but your first job, you're not going to have an offer yet. So trying to figure out how can you sustain yourself for, let's say, a multi-month search where you try to inoculate yourself against being absolutely desperate to take whatever job, however they pay, as soon as it's offered, right? That you can understand, while it's easy for me to say you should resist that because I'm securely and gainfully employed. So, heck on me. You can appreciate that does not put you in a good position in terms of defending your goals and your minimum standards for yourself, right? So trying to strengthen that is key. So the bargaining zone. That's the area between those points, the two reservation points, as high as the employer is willing to go on a given item and as low as you're willing to go. That distance is the bargaining zone. And the thing is, there is usually a gap, there's a distance, right? And in between there is where on each item, the resolution for each item should fall. But very often with employees where they don't negotiate, or they don't negotiate with these tools, they just zip to whatever the employer's target point is. They just slide down and they get very little, even though they could have gotten more. They could have. They leave resources for themselves on the table and walk away from them. because they don't ask, they don't negotiate. Now, sometimes for certain items, at least the bargaining zone, that difference is pretty small. And the only way you can get inside of it and like try to get in the middle or the upper end of that for you as a prospective employee is by back and forthing, by engaging in a patient, keep breathing, negotiating process where through that back and forth, offer, counteroffer, we'll talk about that, it's revealed what that zone is, because each time a number is stated, you kind of get closer into understanding what the difference is and what the room is for negotiating on each and every item. Okay, how are we doing, Jakia, on any questions or comments? Anything?
We're doing good. No
Okay.
questions right now.
Okay. Really?
I'm loving it though.
Are y'all awake though? I'm just making sure, because like if you have questions, the thing is there's no dumb questions, seriously. Like if you are thinking, oh no, oh no, I'm not going to do that. You're not the only one. So let's please kind of chime in on the chat and let's exorcise our emotional demons about this, because we all have them. And the information, that's your advanced homework. The interwebs, Google, internet, these are your friends. These will save you, will garner you so much money, so many resources by researching online, right? And looking at the job post, if anything's listed. If you don't know people that have held a job in the organization you're applying to, or a similar job at another organization, right? Looking online at going position posts and their salaries and the benefits currently, like figuring out what you can learn about compensation where you're applying is so helpful, right? Even calling up, maybe don't mention your name, and get a friend to do it if you're nervous. Like, hey, I just saw this really great job posting for such and such. Do you happen to know what the starting range on that is, right? Can't hurt. They may not tell you, but it certainly can't hurt. Okay, so information's your friend. All right, so we talked about the elements. If there's no questions about the elements, I'm going to switch now to how to prepare for negotiating. Okay, and Jakia, are we good to do that?
One question.
Yeah.
Okay. It says, I've used Indeed and Glassdoor to look at salaries in the area. Do you have others you recommend?
I don't. It varies so greatly. So I've looked at like LinkedIn, for example, will often with the job posting, they will guess on a salary based upon the posting. LinkedIn estimates, the LinkedIn estimates at least are garbage. Like for the jobs that I've looked at, they are almost always inaccurate. So I'm a little nervous about those kind of extrapolated estimates in some of the job search engines. The best thing to do is to try to do a search for a job title or similar titles and see if you can find postings where they have posted a range. But ideally, again, it needs to be like in the tri-state area, the metropolitan area. If you're looking here, it needs to be a comparable cost of living, geographic area context, okay? Or just chatting, putting out feelers with classmates, with folks at your placements. Professors don't tend to really know about this stuff very much unless they are, folks who are adjuncts who are in the field potentially, but just asking around and calling if you need to, okay? Okay, so how to prepare. So the first thing is to identify your items that are important to you. So those are the parts of the compensation package, right? So obviously salary, and we assume salary. Maybe you're applying for something where it's an hourly pay rate per diem if it's temporary or whatever. So what you're getting paid and the rate of that. But there are other items that you really need to include, right? And that includes health insurance and the cost of that for you, for dependents. Unless you absolutely have a guaranteed source of that. But even if you do, you still want to kind of talk about that in the negotiation session. There's retirement contribution, and I don't care how young you are or how little you anticipate getting paid, please include that in your compensation. And by this, I mean what the employer will contribute to your retirement savings. Okay, that's really important, because the sooner you start, like the tiniest little amounts of contribution young, outpace so dramatically big contributions that you have to start making if you defer doing that until you're my age or like 40s or whatever. It really pays to do a little bit much earlier. You will thank yourself. Your old self will thank your young self. Okay. Professional development funds, supervision, like if they don't have a supervisor in-house and you need someone for your LCSW, you're paying for that. There may be issues if you have to have travel for work, mileage reimbursements, pay time off, as I said. Pay time off, it can work multiple ways. It can be that you have discrete uses like vacation, personal, sick. Sick days are required in the state of New Jersey, but you could have more than the requirement. Sometimes though you have paid time off, it's a bank, like a cafeteria, just all together. And so you need to be prepared for thinking about paid time off in different ways, depending upon how the organization does it. You need to think about it in terms of combo versus broken out. And then also in amount of weeks, amount of days, amount of hours, because they may come at you with a unit of time that if you haven't prepared for it, you can't quickly think about that. And I don't know about you, but I can't just think about numbers tossing at me. I have to like have them written down, which as another important note, you should absolutely feel comfortable bringing in written notes and referring to them during this meeting. There's no way that you can negotiate from memory, from good intentions, right? So have notes, be writing notes, refer to them. You could, if you feel nervous and you're looking down and breaking eye contact, you can say, thank you so much, I'm hearing that. Let me just kind of review my notes on that or take a note real quickly so I don't lose track of what we're talking about. That's totally fine. Yes.
I'm sorry.
No.
There's another question.
Yes.
So it says, I have insurance through my husband's employer. Is it possible to leverage declining the employer's health insurance package for higher compensation?
Yes. And I would, I mean, they may say no, they may decline it, but is it reasonable to attempt? Yes. And in fact, I honestly feel like organizations in our field ethically should have an approach to whenever they are providing benefits to any employee, they should honestly have the discipline of when an employee declines insurance because of other access, they should honestly be putting funds into a rainy day account for that employee anyway. So they do not get in the habit of there being any financial incentive to bring on employees who don't need health insurance. I think it's a really problematic practice. And we can discipline ourselves as organizations and human services away from that by saying, well, we're going to make ourselves on the hook for this regardless. And if not for the full amount that we would have paid, then some amount of that. Okay, so yes, absolutely. You can, that is certainly reasonable to attempt. Like when you're trading in a car, when you're buying a new one, I would not mention that till the end, but we'll get there. Any other question right now on that front? That's kind of the process, like how-tos. We'll get to that in just a second. Now we're doing the prep, like what you need to do up front before you sit down to the negotiation. So identify all those items. And here's the other thing. Items have subparts. What are the subparts? So salary, maybe it's like raises, like negotiating about raises. And negotiating raises can be a way to try to move salary that's hitting a wall for you, or it's not where you want it to be. Then you can counteroffer, okay, I can accept that if you could consider a raise at the 6-month point, assuming positive performance of X amount, right? So you could try to split the difference or kind of, compromise on that. So raises for paid time off, what the increase rate is over seniority, over years of service, the amount of rollover, like do you have open access to unused days or does it die? So kind of proposing what your rollover access is. Negotiating around a waiting period to access, right? Sometimes there's like a 90-day, 60-day, whatever window, negotiating on that point too, like when benefits will start for you, right? So each item potentially has sub items. It's not just the, the clean out. With health insurance costs, right? We'll talk about, can you negotiate health insurance costs? Not really, but yes. So we'll get there. But with health insurance costs, there's the premium cost. There is what's offered, PPO, HMO, right? There's copays. Right? There's all different, for those of you that have familiarity with health insurance, and you all should before you negotiate, before you apply for jobs. There are a lot of different points. And the thing is, it's so expensive that you can't possibly think about what a salary offer for an employer is worth until you know what you're going to face out of pocket for health insurance. It could devalue the salary offer by thousands of dollars if it's an expensive plan. Okay, you have to negotiate it. Okay, so got the items. Make a table. I'm a table gal. Make a table, list out the items, the subparts of the items, and then have some columns. First column, your target. On each of those items and sub items, what do you want to walk away with? And think through how, how to set that. And we'll talk about that in a second. So what do you want to end at for each and every item? And then next column, your reservation points. What's your bottom line? What's your bottom line? That means solemnly, this is sacred, that if an offer from the employer for any of those items comes in below that amount, by definition, you walk away. Not like turning over the table, like, forget this, I'm out of here. But you say, I'm really sorry, I just can't, I can't go there, right? That's just not enough for me to work with. So what does that mean? For some smaller items, okay, maybe you set the item at 0, like you kind of don't care, like you could get by without any kind of funding for training, like going to conferences. I don't think that's a great idea, even for a smaller item like, professional developments. You want to be a continuous learner and grow in your profession, right? And certainly you can't have 0 for a salary, right? You certainly have to have a bottom line for that. So what I would say is to set the reservation points, you need to think about your BATNAs, your backup plans, make those as good as possible, like really think through how many months of this search can I sustain where I do not have to dive at the first thing that dangles in front of me. Like, what can I do to sustain a search where I can be picky? Meaning I can have higher bottom lines, right? I would talk to friends, not the friends and family. So not the ones who are nervous. Oh, honey. Oh, but you might make them angry. No, please do not. They're lovely. But please don't talk to them right now. Talk to the ones who are like, girl, or not just girl, but person, like graduate, come on. You are awesome. You have a lot to offer. You have a lot of bills. You have things you want to do with your life beyond work. You need to do da, 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 da. Those are the people. Please talk to them. Figure out who they are. Talk to them. Don't talk to the nervous ones right now. You can tell them what happened later. And then set those points. And if you walk through each one, and if you feel like you could not turn down an offer that fell below any of those amounts, you're not done. You have to kick the tires on them until you feel like I can defend these. Okay. And then you say your opening offers. What? She didn't mention another kind of thing. Well, now I am. So you have your target where you want to walk away with, right? And your bottom line, what you can't go below. But in our culture, there are different bargaining or negotiating cultures. But in the US context, you never start like your first, ask, like what you say you want. You don't start where you want to end. You have to have some fudge, some wiggle room. Think about going to a flea market, a garage sale, where there's bargaining, right? You come in with your first offer knowing you're going to have to slide a little, right? So you have to pad, right? And everyone knows that. Here's the thing: if you come in, just to tease this out further, if you come in at your target point and you're thinking you're going to defend that point, like, so you say, I want this, and the employer comes in below that saying, well, no, I can't do that. I can do this other number. And you're like, no, actually, I need this. They're going to think that you are tone deaf, like you don't know how to negotiate, that you're being rude, that this is a negotiation process, meaning a back and forth. So you have to have a back and forth. And if you start with your target point, you, by definition, then with that culture of bargaining, you won't get it. You'll immediately lose it because you have to slide a bit. So I can't tell you exactly the dollar amount, but for salary, I mean, a couple $1,000s, certain little, single digit percentage point padding. So let's say you're going to come in asking for 60, or no, I'm sorry, you want 60, that's your target point for salary. Start at 63, okay? So that you have room to have a chance, because even then, you may slide below 60 unless you're really undercutting, your information was bad and they have more to pay you than you thought that was the case. Okay, so set those opening offers for every single item. paid time off, retirement contribution, health insurance bits and pieces, professional development, and the salary, the raises, the rollover, the waiting periods, everything sets the target point, the reservation point, and your opening offer. Okay. And then finally, consider the pace and the context. Those of you, I didn't say us, who are really kind of cool cucumbers and able to kind of adapt and roll with lots of different things, this may be less important. But for others of us, or if you're really apprehensive about negotiating, which I think probably then covers every single person, think about how long the session's going to be, where it's going to be, a plan for a location so you know how to get there early. I could say 15 minutes early, better, right? Who you're going to do it with. Will it be with the person you interviewed with? Will it be somebody else? Will it be multiple people? And again, I think I said how long. So you have a sense of the arc that you're working with, right? So you don't have to be rushed, or you won't, rush when you actually have a lot of time, right? Or more time than you thought. Okay, so kind of plan for that. And it's very reasonable when you get a call saying, giving you an offer. I'm going to talk about that logistic in just a second, to ask those questions about how it's going to go. So on that note, will you get an invitation to have a negotiation session when you get a job offer reliably? No. In our field currently, it is, I would say, not, it may be more prevalent than not, but it is not necessarily a regular occurrence that employees are extended a job offer and then get an opportunity, an invited opportunity to negotiate. Every single one should. That is the norm in other fields, and it should be our norm. So note to all of you in your inevitable eventual roles as employers on the other side, please be sure you do that when you're hiring, right? So what may happen, actually before this, what may happen is during an interview, right, you'll get asked, what salary do you want? When you don't have a job offer. This is just during the interview. Okay. No. So when you're an employer, don't do that either. If you get asked that, and that unfortunately may well happen, the kind of answer you want to give is something along the lines of, you know what, that's an understandable question. I would love to get to the point of talking about that, but I feel like I still need to learn more about the position and how it relates to the job and its responsibilities and such, right? And you can say a version of that a few times. And hopefully the interviewer gets the notion that that conversation will come when you have an offer and you're still learning. If it's someone who is at all astute about negotiating, you will get total props because you know what you're doing. It is not advantageous to you where you've not prepared, you've not followed the slide of steps for negotiating. Like, you can't possibly weigh in on that yet. You haven't done the work, and you probably are still learning about the position, right? So put that off absolutely until after you have an offer. Negotiating does not occur until you have an offer. And then you get the offer. They call you up, they email you, hey, we'd love to have you have this job. This is the pay, do you accept? That happens a lot in our field. It makes me very sad, and it's not okay. So what you need to say at that point, and I'm sorry that you will very possibly have to do that work, is to say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this opportunity. Thank you for notifying me. I would, I need to put some thoughts together. I would love to set a time as soon as possible when you're available to sit down and talk about the compensation package. When is good for you?
Anna?
Yes.
Sorry, there's two questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question is, should you or do you have to put your number on the table first?
Yeah, so we'll get there. No, ideally no. Woo! But no.
Then
we'll get there. That's the next slide about now we're doing it, how to do it. So
okay.
Any other questions about more prep? Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, how might negotiation look different in a union environment?
Oh, yes. Okay, so what unions are, the reason they're so helpful in a lot of ways, right, is that they take the individualized negotiation up to the collective. So in fact, in a union environment, you don't need to negotiate. I don't need to teach you how to do this because you have representation that is doing it for you. And we can immediately understand it. For all the sweating and white knuckling that we're doing thinking about this, the union does that for you, right? I mean, at most what you would do coming in a union environment is like if there are steps and grades of salary that you would come in at, where then it's a very negotiated context or predetermined, you could individually negotiate around how your experience in education translates into a step, into a pay grade, right? But no, in a unionized context, the beauty is the negotiation is collectivized. It's being done for you, and chances are done very well, right? Compared to what a lot of individuals can wind up pulling off, because individuals, it will vary. Like that's what the gender pay gap is about, and other kinds of pay gap by identity, right? That there's bias that factors in, as well as all that ability and personality, being extroverted versus introverted, and how hard it is, right? Unions level that playing field quite a bit. So that's a great question. Other question? No, nothing.
No. That's
Okay,
all.
okay. Okay. All right. So we got the context. Yeah. So think through it. Think in advance. Yeah, we're good. And I would say, I just say that I talk about this in when I teach about job interviewing. This is a time to not to be really superficial, but how to the extent that superfice helps with strategy and confidence. Probably good to err on the side of dressing a little too formally than too informally, in the sense that it will help you feel grounded, like a professional, able to assert yourself, right? If unless you really don't care. But I mean, you have the job offer at that point, so you don't need to impress for that reason. But if it helps to bolster your confidence, do what you need to do in that regard. Okay. All right. So now let's okay, hold on. Why is it not? Sorry, it's not. Okay. Now we're doing it. Here we go. Okay, so I'm a parent. Long ago, I had a little tiny kids, and I used to take them to a children's museums. And at most children's museums, for those of you that have been as a kid or as a parent or as a caregiver, they have an area of the museum which has these little air pockets, and then they'll have these whatever kind of balls, light ones, rubber ones, whatever. And the activity is for the kid to stand there and try to balance the ball on the air currents. And it's huge, delightful fun, because inevitably it's kind of a little bit hard to do that until the ball goes flying off. Usually it wings the parent in the head, who gets really annoyed from the sides of the room. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, so think of the negotiation process where each item of all those items on your table is a ball. And to start the process, you have the floor, I'm going to call it a table, and the table has these little air currents coming off of it, right? And to get the negotiation started, you need to get the balls balanced on their respective air currents, that are coming up from this table. And the end of the negotiation, when it's done, the air currents, maybe the air lessens or whatever, because it'd be kind of hard to get the balls down otherwise, whatever. So the metaphor is a little bit not perfect, but so basically that the balls come down to the table. All right. So generating an item list in the negotiation, two of you, let's assume two for now, might be, multiple of them, whatever. You're sitting down and you want to talk about what you want to talk about. All right. So here's the thing. It's really, actually, let me switch my notes. I'm on the wrong page so I don't miss anything. Okay. So this is the time. This is like the table of contents. You mention what you want to talk about, but you do not get into amounts of anything, no details. It's just the table of contents. Okay, so ideally an employer, hopefully one day you start that, you get it going, say, hi, oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you, a little chit chat, small talk. We are so excited to give you this offer. Thank you for coming in. I want to talk to you about what you have in mind and what we have in mind for the compensation package. So what I thought we would talk about today is obviously salary, health insurance, paid time off, retirement, professional development funds. What am I missing? What else would you like to add to that? And so you'll have your list. And if there's other stuff, put that into. Now, here's the thing. Unfortunately, not in our field, especially, there aren't sometimes really experienced negotiators. And so they may not do that for you. And so you kind of like where you to manage about not providing salary information at the interview and managing having to actually get a negotiation session, you might need to do this too. It's really important. Don't skip it. So even if they come in and say, hi, oh my gosh, so nice to talk to you. What were you thinking about in terms of salary? No. Actually, you need to facilitate into an issues list, right? So you need to say, oh gosh, thanks for getting the ball rolling. I'm eager to talk about that. If you don't mind, it would just help me to review what we're going to talk about today. So things that I would love to talk with you about include salary, obviously, and then also bum, 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 bum. There's no amounts attached yet, just the list of the items, right? Let me tell you why it's so important. If you need to signal to the other person, if they don't give you a chance to give the list of what all you want to cover, they may blank. If they're not really experienced, they may not think to talk about that. And so they may not leave time for it. And so you mentioning that up front, make sure that they are pacing according to that reality, right? The other thing is strategically, and it seems like it's unfair for you to get the following penalty where it wasn't your fault. But if they don't give the list and then you don't give a list and you get into salary and you kind of try to negotiate it, and then you bring up other issues, other items later, it can give the impression that you're being gamey, that you're mentioning other items because you're not happy with the original item. We've had this experience with like people in our lives when we get into arguments and we'll be arguing about one issue and then the person like does a little sideways zigzag. Well, what about this thing too? And you're like, what's that? We're talking about this one thing, A, not B. Why are you mentioning B, right? We have that experience. It happens in negotiation. So the best way to avoid that, giving that feeling, is that you mention the issues up front that you want to talk about. Okay.
Anna,
yes.
2 questions.
Yep. Okay.
One says, I find this conversation often happens over the phone. Do you recommend in person so we can read the nonverbals?
I would, so in person is now still pretty rare. I mean, Zoom is really helpful. Like admittedly right now I can only, people's videos are off. And so I can't tell how horrified or unhappy or comfortable or in between all of you guys are as I'm talking. And so it's definitely making it hard for me to, I'm only hoping you're all with me, like buying what I'm selling. But so, I mean, having that, as you just said, the nonverbal data is really helpful. So a Zoom, if you can try to get a Zoom call, that could be cool. Otherwise it may need to be on phone, you know, and that's, so then the benefit there is you can do the silent screen and no one's going to see you. Like if you're freaking out, you know, you have the full visual, you know, privacy. But I do agree that the nonverbals can be quite helpful, for sure. Any other question?
Yes. Is it improper to mention the position that may be competing for your interests?
Oh, that to me is kind of like with the car negotiation. You've got a trade in. I think I would be inclined to hold off on that. You want to get the best arrangement on the current deal, and then you can bring in the other. Right. And this is the one important thing here is that negotiation is art as much as science. So I'm giving you the content, but the delivery, I'm going to talk about that in just a second about how you deliver things. There's an artfulness that we all know from being, you know, social work trained and clinical skills. We know from clinical skills, right? And how you say something, the volume, if it's going to be visual as well as audio, the nonverbals that you have are really important in terms of combining being assertive with being respectful and kind, right? So to how you talk about a job, like, I have another job. What can you do about it? Like, no one's going to say that, but like, versus this is really great. Now, I do actually, like, see where I'm kind of squinty, but I do actually have another offer that's quite compelling, but to be honest, I'd love to have this one instead, but it is offering more in terms of so just kind of the tone, the softness, your facial expression can be a way to strategically land something. So we'll talk about that in just like pretty much now. Vicky, have we covered the questions for now though?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you got the issue list. So all the balls are up, hovering over the table. Okay. No numbers. And they may say, like, as you mention items, as it comes out of your mouth, and maybe, oh yeah, so what are you thinking about in terms of that? Say, oh, eager to talk about that. If you don't mind, I just want to kind of give a list right now. And then if you have things to add to it, and then we'll dig in. Okay. Okay. So then there's the initial offers. And the structure of the negotiation after you do the initial offer piece is you do a volley. And then you're going to have concessions. So now I'm going to talk about the volley, the initial offers and the counter offers. That's the second and third bullet point on the slide. Okay. So someone's going to start with an initial offer. You really hope it not be you. Why is that? Because for you to go first, you have to have such huge faith that your information, your homework in setting your points was accurate, such that you have achieved feasible ambition with each of them. What does that mean? Feasible, that you're not going to sticker shock the heck out of them, but nonetheless ambitious, that you're not going to lowball yourself. And I will say, having taught this for 20 years and then consulted with students who graduated, for years and years after they graduated about their real negotiations, that by far the greater challenge is being ambitious than being feasible. It is rare for folks to do sticker shocking way out beyond. It's more that you undercut, right? And so if you set your offers, like your target and your initial offer too low and you go first, oh, right, you've left money on the table. So let them go first, right? And they may say, like, after you're done with the issue list, if they're good or they're avoidant, they're gonna say, so what were you thinking about in terms of salary? Okay, you could answer, but probably a little bit better is to respond with, thanks for getting the ball rolling. It would be helpful to get a sense of what you had in mind. You can try that once. If they come back with, nah, why don't you start? Then you need to start. Like that, then it gets too much cat and mouse kind of thing. But really do try to have them go first. It could potentially be worth thousands of dollars, right? If your homework is bad or you were underconfident. You talk to your nervous, grandmother a little too much, like even though I told you not so much until later. Yeah, so let them go first and they'll give an offer, right? If the offer blows your initial offer, the buffered target, out of the water, that should be a red alert that your information and your level of ambition was too low and you need to quickly get confident and kind of elevate on the spot, right? So if you set an amount, let's say it was 55 was your opening offer and they come out with 60, as much as the initial response is, oh my God, that's amazing. No, it's not actually, because it means that you undercut yourself in your planning. And it also means almost by definition that they could go higher. Now, if they say, if they pair it with, we want to offer you 60, unfortunately, because of the grant, that is absolutely fixed. We cannot do anything more than that. Then you can't necessarily automatically adjust and ask for more. However, we'll talk about in concessions that you actually can in an indirect way. So let's bracket that move in just a second. So let's say they start things off, they give an amount. And if they just say 60, whatever, irrespective of what your amount was, let's say yours was higher, right? Because if it's lower, you still have to respond accordingly. You're going to respond, right, with a counter, and you want it to be higher, right? So let's say presumably, let's say they start at 50 and your target was 60. Okay, so they said, we were thinking 50. So you're going to say that's a $10,000 gap. That's not chump change. So you will respond. And let's say when the other party gives an offer, you do want to respond fairly quickly. Why is that? Not like stepping on their toes, but you want to respond apace. That shows that you're confident about negotiating. And the longer it takes you to respond, it gives this unstated feel to the other party that you agree with the offer, that you're okay with it. So you don't want to let it sit in the air for those two reasons. So you want to say, oh, okay, actually, so $10,000 is not nothing, right? So you, in your facial expressions, if it's on Zoom or in person, you say, thanks for for getting it started. That's actually lower than I was thinking. I was hoping for 60. All right, so you can kind of, with the face versus, let's say they came up with 55 and you wanted 60, it's a little tighter. You can say, thanks for getting the ball rolling. I was actually thinking 60. You see how that kind of my facial expression and the tone was reflective of a smaller gap, right? The 10 is, I was actually thinking 60. Like, I realize this is $10,000 versus I was thinking 50, I was thinking 60 from 55. It's a little calmer, right? So how you convey can help with the vibes, right? And managing those. Now, when you give an offer, whether it's you're starting or you're responding to someone else's offer, you need to be quiet. You need to say a flat number, not a range. Why do you not give a range? I was thinking like 60 to 63. What is the employer going to hear? And what are they going to work from? 60. Always a flat number. We give a range because we're trying to soften, like hedge. You can do that with your tone. And if you have the verbal, the nonverbal, the visual with your body language. You don't do that with your numbers and you don't do that with your words, because if you give an offer and you say, I was thinking 60, anything you're going to say after saying that before the employer counters is really bad news. Because what is it? But that's just a starting point. But I'm negotiable. Right? No. You can just literally hear the dollars, the coins running down the drain. Right? So flat number. You sit tight. Imagine sitting on your hands, but with your mouth. Right? And you just wait. Right? And wait kind of with a kind face. Sympathetic. Thanks for working with me face. And wait. And they may be like, oh my God, we can't do that. Or they may say, why do you think you're going to get paid that much? Right. And again, that's getting into your interest. That interest versus position thing that I stressed was so important. You can say, I'm eager to hear what else you had in mind. I'm so excited about this offer, and my ability to accept it. It depends on, what we can come together on in terms of compensation. This seems reasonable. Right? Because at this point, the beauty of waiting until you have a job offer to negotiate is you don't need to, you don't want to be obnoxious, but you don't need to justify it. They've already said, it's you. We want you. So you don't need to justify on personal bases, and you never volunteer a justification. But if you're asked, because you have a job offer, you never ever base it in your personal stuff. It's always about the job and what the job and its responsibilities merit, right? Because here's the thing, if you base it on your personal stuff, there may be people who would work alongside you in comparable or even lower positions who are awful negotiators, who have like 2 master's degrees and 20 years of experience more than you do, who are getting paid $10,000 less. You don't want to do that, right? It's the job at this point. So let me check in about any additional questions. How are we doing, Jakia?
We're doing good. No questions right now.
Okay. All right. So with the volley, there'll be an initial offer. Hopefully it's the employer. You're going to counter, and it's going to be, so if it's like, let's say they start with 50 on salary. It's like, oh, actually I was thinking 60. They're, oh, I can't do, oh, wow, I don't know, I could do 52. And you could say, well, thank you for trying to meet me. I just can't go that low. I would consider coming down to 57. Right. And then they may do one more. So you 2 and 2. One important thing before I kind of get us into the next phase, the concessions, be sure to keep track of how much each of you is coming down, because what also tends to happen with new negotiators and with the downside, the employee side, is that you will jump down faster and more than the employer. So if you notice, I went from 60 to 57 myself, and the employer, I think, had them go from 50 to 52, right? So I went down 3, they only came up 2. So even I was doing it. Right. So be careful, especially then if you get into a situation where the employer suggests splitting the difference. You want to split the difference from the original first 2 offers, the initial offer and the counter, not from the final two, especially if the increments have been different and their increment was tighter than yours, if that makes sense, right? Which is why you have to be tracking the numbers. Like have an employer side, an employee side, you side, and track every single thing that comes in, right? So maximum 2 freebies, like 4 total on this volley thing, where literally money's being given away. Now you see why the buffered target is so important for you to have any chance it's getting your target. If you're starting at your, the buffer target and you want to end at your target and you're going to have 2 offers that you're going to offer in response to 2 employer offers, you can see you got to keep the increments tight. You have to have a buffer, right? So then here's what you do. That's really weird. It's like learning to ride a bike. You never single item negotiate the big items. So salary, health insurance, retirement, paid time off are the 4 really big ones. You don't bring that ball down to the table by itself. You're going to get into concessions eventually. And the way you set that up is say, this has been really helpful. Admittedly, the salary or whatever the thing is not where I need it to be yet, but it would be helpful at this point to table this and then pivot to the item of whatever you pick, whatever's important to you, health insurance, right? So you're going to literally suspend it. Like it's kind of come down with each offer, counter offer, counter the counter, counter the counter the counter. It's coming close to the table, but it's not down yet. And you suspend it midair, one of those big 4s, the 4 items. And then you do the same thing as you turn to the next big item that's important to you. And you do the same thing all over again, right? Because once the ball coming down, when it hits the table, like when you have agreed mutually on a number or an amount, it's not super glued, like not ever to be removed. But if you want to go back to it in the light of something really bad you learned about the cost or the offer or something else and try to change it, it's like you're ripping up industrial strength Velcro. Like it's loud and frictiony in terms of trust. It's not good, right? So ideally you hold that on and you suspend it. This is where it feels like riding a bike, like, oh, what are you asking me to do? That's crazy. And you suspend it, you say very clearly, and a good suspend is the following. You need to acknowledge that gap thing, right? If the salary, if you're pretty close, like it's not bad, then signal that. It's not quite where I need it to be, but it's getting there, right? But can we pivot to this? But if it's still serious, like it's 10,000 or whatever, it feels serious to you, you can say, admittedly, this is not, see my face, it's not where I need it to be yet, but I think it would be helpful to pause on this momentarily and then turn to this. So signal the tone, the visual of your face, how much work is to be done. Because if you're just flat, it's not there yet, but let's just turn to this. The person's going to assume favorable for them. They're going to assume, oh, you're basically okay with it, or it's close, not much more work to be done, and then we're going to talk to something else and come back and sign off on that. So you do need to signal that more work is needed on that front. So, and then you're gonna do the same thing again with item 2. And if you have a taste for it, you could do the same thing again for an item 3. I think any more than that, and heads do begin to explode, even among confident math-oriented people. So at that point, then, once you're done with the 3rd, let's say, or even the 2nd, say, okay, that's been very helpful. Now I'd like to try to talk through ways that we can work out some of this and land these items. Now, let me go back for a second and talk about negotiating health insurance, right? Do I actually think that you can tell an employer you'd like to have a certain amount in premium? No, that's third-party provider set by an insurer. The employer, though, does make decisions. Like the offer that they're giving you is they've made decisions about what plans to offer, PPO or HMO, how much the premium, like what they're going to contribute in the premium, how much you have to pay out of pocket for you and or your family, how much the copays are, what the waiting period is. Like they've made those decisions. That is effectively an offer to you, even though they don't control all of the numbers. They're more in control than you are, right? So the reason that it's important for you to set those amounts, right, that are important to you, but how much you want to pay per month in premiums, that can range in the thousands of dollars. Copays can be 100 per visit for a doctor's visit, right? Health insurance is expensive. It can quickly lower the true value of your salary, even when you're really excited about salary. Suddenly it can be like, oh, this salary net is like not that impressive, right? So you want to set the amounts, and then you can, when you talk about health insurance, you can say, so what are you offering in terms of health insurance, right? Notice that language. I did not ask, how is health insurance handled here, right? How it's handled suggests that that's fully the employer's entitlement, and you have no skin in the game. You just have to accept what they say they're doing. What is your offer? Like at this moment in our interface, what are you offering in terms of health insurance? Now they may say, oh, you got to read the manual. It's like, well, in order for me to really get a sense of how the compensation package works for me, I really need to understand what you're offering in terms of health insurance costs. And if need be, and if you need to like defer the compensation negotiation until you have that information, like if you're an employer, you should always bring that information with you. Absolutely. Like with that, send it in advance. If it's fixed, let the employee have it in advance so they know. And then you bring it up and you can say, and so let's say whether they send you the information and you have it, or they give a number for the premium for starters, and they say, well, the premium depends on what plan you want. And you can say, well, I need the PPO. And as a little basic primer on health insurance, PPO, higher premium, like higher out of pocket, but lots of choice. If you're not so needing to have really broad choice or certain specialists and you want to save on money, then HMO is generally the better bet. That's kind of the main difference between those two plans. So let's say you need choice and you have established provider relationships, you don't want to change them, right? So I do need a PPO. They may not offer a PPO. And so you're facing an HMO where you may be paying completely out of pocket for providers you want to keep that are not covered by the HMO, right? So that's a consideration. So, but let's say they offer the HMO. Okay, so you say, yeah, the HMO is great. What is the premium? And so they say the premium, let's look at the chart, to this, it's going to be $1,000 a month for you and a partner. See, then you can say, okay, wow, admittedly, that is quite a bit more than I was aiming for. I was hoping to at most pay $500 a month. Right? By saying that, you are negotiating. You're not suggesting that the employer can control that, although they controlled it by accepting that health insurance plan and deciding how much they're going to pay for it. But it's ceasing this idea that a supposedly fixed item fixed by a third party means that suddenly your interest in that just evaporates. That somehow that $500 difference in what you wanted to pay and what you're going to have to pay, that it somehow doesn't matter, that you're going to absorb that. So what you can say is, oh, okay, yeah, wow, that is really quite a bit more than I was aiming for. I was aiming for 500. And that then, by saying that, and they're like, well, we can't fix that. Ugh. Then that opens up to going back to salary and saying, okay, I understand. And I do need a PPO. I know the HMO is less, but I really prefer that's what I'm aiming for. I could do that. That would work for me if you would go up on salary from X, what the person last offered, to Y. And Y needs to be at least 500 times 12, right? Because you're paying that every single month, right? So you see what I'm saying? By bringing that into the negotiation in this concession, this is this third phase of the negotiation, I could do this on X, item X, if you would do that on Y, item Y. Right, so I could do the PPO with $1,000 premium if you would meet me by coming up on salary to Y, right? So that is the beauty. It's also the beauty in terms of the concessions and truly negotiating, because let's say a person says something is not negotiable. Again, it doesn't mean your interest in your position evaporates on that issue. You can say that's disappointing to hear. Again, if it's fixed, if you're saying that you can't budge on that, I could be okay with that. Again, if you could go to X on this other item, like X amount on this other item, right? So even when someone says that an item is fixed, even when you realistically know it's not, that it's fixed, sorry, because it's a third-party provider, you can, okay, assume that fixed amount. How are you going to be made whole through an item that's not fixed? Okay, let me pause. Woo, the numbers on the notifications, the chat went up. So what kinds of questions do we have at this point? Let me check time too.
No questions right now.
None. Okay, my goodness, I'm seeing lots of numbers, but no questions. Okay.
I do have a quick question. I'm sorry. So would that be a statement that I would actually use? Like, how could I be made whole since this area is fixed?
Being made whole is perhaps a little bit dramatic, but you can say,
Okay.
you just, yeah, I'm sorry, that's a good question because I did use the wording. Just say, yeah, wow, that's quite a bit more than I was aiming to pay. You know, I do need the PPO. I could work with that if you could work with me. I think I like that wording better. If you could work with me on the salary, I could do that health insurance offer. I can frame it as an offer, even though it's like, it's a thing that's fixed by the company. It's still their offer to you, right? So I could work with that offer on health insurance if you could come up on salary to X, right?
Yeah, because I was,
yeah.
I'm sorry, because I was just asking to see if there's like common language used during negotiation that's kind of,
I mean, it's this
that go
general
across
vibe.
bills.
Yeah, I mean, so generally just, you know, work with me. I could do that if you could do this. You know, I could come up on, go down on Y or come up on Y if you would, you know, come up or go down on X. Like that's kind of the concession type language, right? I was hoping for what is your offer? Get to avoiding language like, how is it done here? How do you handle? That wording makes it gives the other party all the power and makes things sound fixed when that's not really relevant in a negotiating context, right? So whatever's fixed, that's fine, but then try to get your needs addressed by working on the things that aren't fixed. So that if they can't move on to one thing, how about you can take that if they can move on another thing, right? And I'll tell you, by assuming that your positions are legitimate and not assuming that things aren't negotiable, suddenly when you do, again, politely, respectfully engage in concessions, sometimes things that supposedly were not negotiable become so. Because when you advocate for your positions and you ask for this trade-off, right, it shows the other party what's important to you. And if they want to have you, like they want to figure out how to make this work, like they can't give away what they can't give away, but they know what they can give away. And so they can kind of survey their set of resources and figure out what to give you. And the best way that they'll do that is by you conveying what's important to you. And when you suggest concessions, like I could do this if you could do that, when you say that thing, that's telling them, okay, so that thing, that's important to them. I will make them happy if I can kind of move on that, right? So you engaging them and suggesting concessions, like pairing items, quid pro quo, helps them to respond to you better. And that way then, both parties, there's an economics term, Pareto optimality. It means that then both parties are better off. Negotiations are amazing because they can in fact make both parties' well-being better than prior to negotiation. It's a really good deal. It's kind of, we should really be all about this in social work, right? Okay, let me just kind of think about, let me look at my notes. Oh, with the concessions too, match the degrees. So don't like, say you can handle 2 fewer days, you want to get 2 more days of vacation and you're going to give up $5,000 in salary for that. No. So try, what I would say in your preparation, in addition to setting all those points in the opening offer, is to, at the bottom, like list out some possible concessions that are balanced, like this amount of money for this amount of whatever, this amount of days for this amount of money, you know, whatever. With retirement contributions, again, really important, quick primer. They're usually based on the base salary, which is why having a high starting base salary is really important, is that your retirement savings are calculated off that. So the higher the base salary, the higher the retirement contributions. It can be a percentage of your salary, and that then tends to be, in our field, like in the single digits. So like 3% of your base salary, right? 5% of your base salary that the employer contributes. Occasionally it's done through a match. So it can be that you have to put in a certain amount and they will match. It might be 1-to-1, like they'll match 100%, like whatever you put in, they'll put in up to a certain cap, like a maximum amount, $5,000 a year. or maybe you put in the amount and they'll put in half, like 50% match. So the match percentage tends to be much higher. It's like 50 to 100, right? Versus if it's a base salary contribution, it's small. It's like 3% of your salary, right? And so negotiating on those percentages, right? So they may offer 2%. I was actually hoping for 5, or I was actually hoping for 7. And depending on your age, that's a little more relevant. The older you are, the higher the amount of savings you need to start putting in or continue putting in. And so that's like salary. I mean, literally, retirement savings is deferred compensation. It's your salary, but you're not getting it until you retire, right? So that whatever the salary amount is, that's the percentage, that's the dollar amount. So you need to calculate how much they're offering relative to what you wanted annually to be put in, and then negotiate accordingly. So if they really can't do higher on a percentage of your salary for retirement savings, they really can't go to 5. They could do 3 tops, but you really wanted 5. Well, I could do 3 if you would agree to come up on salary from X, your last offer, to Y. Y being the number that includes the 2% less salary contribution to your retirement that you get at front end. And just promise yourself you're going to invest that in your retirement and not spend it on whatever. Okay, let me pause. How are we doing? It is now 1:13. There are a couple of troubleshooting slides that I could review, but I want to take any questions that we have now. Jakia.
No questions right now, unless somebody wants to say their question.
Okay. Anybody? I'm going to assume this means that you're all ready to do this. You have no issues. We're all good.
Hi, this is Tawanda. How are you?
Hi.
I just want to say this is some really good information that you are providing. I signed in a little bit late, so I don't know if you touched on this, but also to, when they have to negotiate mileage reimbursement, right? There are like other things they can be thinking about, because there's some jobs that is going to require them to drive a lot. And so you got to think about gas prices and asking some of these additional areas that they might be able to recoup, and feeling confident about that, because as social workers, we tend to lead with our heart on our sleeve, and we tend, that business sense, we don't always have sharp. And so, and to really look out for ourselves. And so whatever pointers you can offer there, I think would be really rich, because we have to market for ourselves. And if we don't believe in our own worthiness and how that translates to monetary gains and income, we just put ourselves at the bottom of the totem pole. But thank you. This is really, really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help clients, certainly not if we're just absolutely just stripped down and not able to deal with our jobs, or leave them, right? Does not help our clients or our organizations, but that's even secondary. Think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. Some of our jobs don't even get at the basic physiological need meeting in terms of their compensation and other supports, let alone getting up to the top of self-actualization, right? So with mileage and or like a commuting, a parking or transportation, getting a commuter pass or whatever, all of those important. That would be an item smaller than the big 4. The big 4 those are the ones where you really can't single item negotiate. Those have to be paired because they're so big. But things like the professional development, mileage, cell phone, whatever. And mileage rate, that's more than gas. That's depreciation on your vehicle and maintenance costs. That's why the federal rate, which I hope has been recently adjusted, given the gas costs, that's why it feels really high sometimes. It's well into the 60s often. It's because 60 cents a mile. That's because it's not just the gas. It's that your car is getting worn down by use, right? And insurance costs and all that stuff. So really want to factor that in for sure. Okay, there was a hand up or a question or something.
Yes.
Yes, I have. My name is Ashley Guathney, and I have a question. So I'm a doctoral candidate, and we're getting ready to graduate in May, and this was very helpful. So thank you very much for doing this. I have a question in thinking about negotiation and thinking about the field of academia. It's very different than any
I've done
arena.
it 3 times. Yes.
Yes, it's so different, and having to know these unwritten rules. So I guess one of the
Mhm.
questions I have in that negotiation process and thinking about some of the perks that come with it, like how would you, weave in things like sabbaticals, flexible
Yeah.
time schedules.
So let's, so I would say, Ashley, in response to your question, I am so happy to talk to you one-on-one because the academic market's a little
Great.
different. So you should so email me. Why don't if Erin or Jakia could put my email address in the chat for you, that would be great. Or you could find it online.
And thank you, Dr.
Academic
Hubbard.
market.
I saw she had posted this on LinkedIn, so I just wanted to thank Dr. Hubbard because this has been so helpful. So thank you.
Awesome, sure. So yeah, academic market. So sabbaticals tend to be a university policy. It's kind of fixed. But what I would say is the startup package. So teaching relief, like kind of course load reductions in early years, service load, RA support, other kinds of research funds, funds for traveling to conferences, other kinds of research costs, software, hardware, books, etc. And then moving. Those are all the kind of, I might be leaving some out, but those are the big ticket items on top of the salary that are really important. So.
Thank you. I'll be sure to send.
Sure. Yeah, but I'm happy to follow up on terms of how that actually pans out, how that works in terms of the unspoken things, right? All of this process in job search across professions and occupations have the unspoken things, and the unspoken things are all about power, and people that are not in the know, are otherized in different ways, get really disadvantaged. And so it is really important that we crack this open and unpack it. And we can't like perfectly prepare for all contingencies, but by giving the basic tools, you're armed to do a lot better than the unspokenness tends to generate, right? So that's really important. Like in our field, we should be all about this, right? Okay, so let me, assuming, Jakia, are there lots? There's two other slides I can go through. They're kind of optional, but are there pressing questions that I should get to?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So let's go over some challenges. So the other party says, oh, so what are you going to do if you don't take this job? Do something else going on? So that someone else referred to earlier on about having a different job option. You could once you've tried to negotiate the main package, you kind of got a draft going. You can maybe mention this point. This has been so helpful. Admittedly, this is a strong package, but I have an offer with another position that is a little stronger in certain points in the following ways. And you can share that. I would say you share that though, only if you really prefer to take the current job, the one that you're currently engaged in negotiating about. Otherwise, you're being a little bit gamey, right? You don't necessarily want to bother someone about negotiating unless you really, really want to stay there. Like if you're pretty much thinking, not just because of the better package, but because of the better job, that you want to take the other bird in the hand, so to speak, then it may not be worth doing that. Right? Unless you want to really be an operator, which is okay, and you try to up this offer and then go back to the other place that had the first better offer, but now that you have a better offer to that offer, and you can see if you can get them to go up. You could do that. People do that all the time, right? So you can play employers against each other. That is fine, and you're still in a power down position relative to the employer. So if you do it professionally and you're responsive and communicative about your decision making in a prompt way, I see nothing wrong with that if you want to do that. So again, you have an offer, you then negotiate for a second for a new position, a different offer. You say, oh, my first offer is a little bit better. Can you meet me on that? And then they do to some extent. You could say, thank you so much. Let me think about it. And then you can go back to the first position and say, hey, since we've talked, I've had a somewhat better offer elsewhere. Could you meet on that? So you can do that, but then you need to, you only do that if you're serious, you have serious intent about both places. Otherwise, it's a little unethical. So if you really are seriously interested in both places, and then as soon as you make a decision, you have both places no, promptly. No one's strung along. But if you don't have another offer, You can just say, oh, in terms of asking you what you're going to do, say, I'm so excited for this opportunity, and I'm just really eager to be able to consider this position. And I'm hoping we can work out a compensation package that mutually satisfies both of us. Like, that's how you respond to what you're going to do. What's your backup? The other party justifying or challenging the justifiability. Why do you think you can ask for that much money? Why do you want that? And you just, again, they're asking for your interest, like your reasoning. Let me tell you a story. When I taught this a long time ago in the 90s, back at Chicago, and they had a job fair, and this job fair brought in people from like around the country. They had a child welfare, a public sector child welfare representative from the state of Mexico, New Mexico, sorry, all the way to Chicago. I think they must have been in urgent need. And because it was out of town, the interview and the offer and then the negotiation all happened within a matter of hours. And the salary offer that the employer offered was incredibly low, even for the student who was not really that ambitious. And she was able to say, I can't live on that. Right. So she shared her justification. I can't live on it. And I'll tell you what the guy did. Hopefully this would never happen, but it can. It's in the realm of possibility if you get into explaining yourself. He pulled out a piece of paper on the table and said, let's work out a budget where you could afford what I'm offering. Right. So that's the continuum you put yourself on if you get into personal justifications. So don't go there. You just say, I'm just excited by this opportunity, and I would love to figure out a mutually satisfying compensation package. Right? You don't go there, right? You stay classy and above it. Another part of the party says that item is not negotiable. So you say, oh, that's disappointing. Okay, well, I could take, as I said before, I could take that amount, that premium, that percentage contribution to my retirement, that whatever, if you would consider going up on salary from X to Y, where again, the Y number is making you whole on the difference from what they're offering on the unnegotiable item and what you wanted of that, right? And then sometimes again, suddenly the non-negotiable item, oh, well, actually I could do that, right? It changes sometimes, but it wouldn't unless you paired that concession and offered that as a possibility. You're wanting to slide on one or more of your reservation points. Nope. Unless suddenly the salary is like below your bottom line, but it's because you thought it was a full-time job and it's only 3 days a week. So that prorated actually pays really well. Okay, unless there's a massive structural change from what you knew, in which case, frankly, you should like pause it because you need to go back and redo your preparation. You need to very smoothly, professionally ask for just a quick bathroom break, go into the stall, do the silent scream, promise yourself your favorite pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream when you get home, whatever you need to do, but you need to give yourself a pep talk because you presumably, our kind of solemn agreement here, okay, you and me, you set those points where you're willing to defend them. And there was a reason to that, right? And so if you're wanting to slide, it's because you're having an emotional kind of defensive reaction that's not serving you well. And it means you would be beginning to not negotiate at that point. So you can't do that. Take a break if you need to. Other challenges, splitting the difference. We already talked about that. That only is fair if you're splitting the difference between the final two numbers, if each person gave up the same amount from the original two numbers, right? So if not, split the difference from the original two, only if you feel okay about that, of course. Scarcity factor, well, we have other candidates. Okay, so this is your negotiation. You're in charge, not me, not anybody else. And so you ultimately make the decision about risk. I would say that tends to be kind of gamey. They obviously wanted you first, like you were their choice. And you can say, I understand. I really appreciate the time that this is taking to talk through this. And I want us both to feel okay about this compensation package, and then just continue to negotiate, right? And then various emotional reactions, reciprocity, consistency, liking, authority. So what are those? So reciprocity is they gave you something, they gave in, so you should give in. The thing is, in negotiation, even the really nice person, we're not assuming that the people you're negotiating with are mean or malicious or whatever, but what they're giving you, they're giving it to you because they can, and potentially because it's cheap. Like pay time off. They may be staffed well enough or flexibly enough that they actually are really able to give in on paid time off. And the thing is, they may have a lot more to give you than they're giving. Like you have no idea. So just, you don't need to be tight and like rigid, but don't assume like huge generosity that then you need to like, you know, completely give, you know, out of your own like core resources to respond to. No, it's hard to interpret in negotiation, so assume that's not the case. Consistency. So there's been research done by on car sales. Researchers will research anything, right? So they've researched when car dealers, like when you walk on the lot and they'll say, are you going to buy a car today if I give you the right price? Like they'll greet you with something kind of like that. And you're like, that's kind of weird and stalky. And you'll be like, yeah, sure. It is in fact the case that when a dealer, a salesperson can get a potential buyer to say yes to that statement, that it stresses buyers out to not follow through with what they said they would do. And it can correspond with greater sales because we psychologically feel bad being inconsistent. So check that. Like if you said that you wanted one thing and then you changed your mind because you misinterpreted it, that's okay, right? You can just note, make a process note. You know what? I misunderstood, or I wasn't adding the numbers up. This is actually what I need to have happen. Liking, that's that, you know, oh, you talk in your small talk about you both had the same alma mater at a small liberal arts college in the West Coast or something, or like you're from the same community, or your mothers know each other. Just check that that's not having an undue effect on what you're giving in on. And the same with authority, which is why I'm a fan of dressing, up dressing, right? If you're at all sensitive to feeling like you're young, you're less experienced, you look young, the way you're dressed doesn't seem professional, and you're going to defer because of that, then try to check that. Try to have kind of a process with yourself before you go into the session where you give yourself a pep talk about that and try to neutralize as much as you can about that. Okay, which is why the points are great. If you have all the points set up and you consider them, you trust them, and you respect them, that actually is its own best protection against that. Okay, 1 minute to go. How are we doing, Jakia, on final questions?
We're doing
And
good.
you know what, I'm going to unshare. Let's see, stop share. So now I can see. Okay. Yeah, anything?
No questions, but does anyone have a question that they want to say?
Anybody? And I'm happy if there are students like, who are going to academia who want a separate talk. I'm happy to arrange that. If you guys want to kind of organize amongst yourselves and we can have a chat, that's fine. I've done that at 3 universities now. So I'm, in addition to teaching about it, so I'm more than happy to have that conversation. And again, your chairs and your mentors, like you should definitely be getting with them and they should be guiding you also. But in addition, if it would be helpful, I'm happy to do that.
That would be great, Dr. Haley, because we could work with the PhD and DSW program directors to arrange that.
Awesome. That sounds great.
What were you saying, Jakia?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying Asia has a question. So
Okay.
Asia, when you're ready, you can say your question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you so much for this workshop. I'm very, very excited to start job searching. I have a question about range, and I'm not sure if you answered this already. However, I'm seeing a lot of nonprofit organizations putting up range, and I assume it's because of budget. So when it comes to negotiating with a range, let's say it's 40 to 50, how far above the highest range should I go?
So generally speaking, there's really not any reason to start below the top of the range in terms of like where you want to target. I would say, with a buffer target, and you may, if you go above the posted range, unless they say, but negotiable, which they often don't, you may get a kind of a stink eye, like you saw the range, didn't you? Right? You might, and you could say, yeah. So I would say, let's say it's 40 to 50, and you come in and say, like, they give you an offer of like 46. and you say, even though there's a 40-50 range posted, you can say, well, I was actually thinking more like 52. That's only if your target is like 50, right? Because it has to be buffered. And they may say, but the range stopped at 50. So in that case, yeah, I said not to like respond to things like or justify, but that's kind of a question posed as a reaction that you might want to respond to. So you could say, you know, I did see that based upon what I've learned about the position and its responsibilities, that seemed appropriate to me. And then let them respond to that. So I would say if the range itself and the top number is not acceptable to you, like not even your bottom line, then of course you shouldn't apply. Don't waste their time. If you feel like, it's okay, I'd love a little more, that's probably okay, but it may well be that they're absolutely capped by, yes, a grant budget or whatever, where they can't go above that. So you do want to, in applying for a job, you should check with yourself to make sure that at least the top of the range meets your bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I know we're 2 minutes over, so I want to be respectful of folks' time. Any other questions?
You know, this is Dr. Hubbard again, Tawanda. I have a suggestion that there be a part 2 to the talk that's brought back to alumni about the academic space and negotiating salary, not just the DSWs and PhDs. They can get it too, but I think there are alumni who are looking to go into DSW programs and PhD programs. And so they toy with the ideas around, is it worth it? The finances, and, you know, what will they all get for getting this higher doctorate? And the monetary piece comes into play. So I do the part about the education, the differences between DSW and PhDs, but sometimes they're looking for more money.
Okay. Yeah. So that sounds like that would be fun to have a bit of like a round table or panel, because it sounds just kind of the career development plus then the financial stuff too. So
yeah, that would be good. So that's something, Aaron, Jakia, we can think about, bring back to the council.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much.
Cool. Anybody else? Are we good? You're all going to negotiate now. Yeah. It's, you know, it's not like a yes, no, like you're doing it or you're not doing it, right? It is a lifelong, it's on a continuum of practice, of self-advocacy practice. And so you are trying to engage it, and engaging it in some amount will always be better than none. If for no other reason than you're practicing self-advocacy, which puts yourself in the space so that you're feeling the power and you are signaling that to your employer. And chances are, actually, if they see you doing that, if they're at all smart and someone that you want to work for, they're like, wow, cool. This person knows how to do this. Awesome. That's going to be good for us. So, okay. All right. Well, I am going to say goodbye and good luck. And thank you for taking this out into the field, because this is my doing social work and equity, is getting people out there to do this and then to help others do it too. So awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Haley. And be well, everyone. Jakia and I will follow up with the link, and then we'll look forward to part 2 behind the academia.
And you know what, I will send you the slide deck and you can decide if you want to do something with that. If people want copies of that, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Be well.
Bye.